system, and this is, I can tell you, my favorite compared to all of the others. This is the nervous system. I am really fond of it. I really love to talk about that very much. And I truly believe that you will also enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying it. So the idea here of a nervous system is that, like everything what we have talked about previously, like how many different organ systems did we cover? Yes, like cardiovascular, respiratory, the digestive. So we've talked about the different types of the tissues and so on. And here comes the idea that all of the organ systems, they need their control, so, and the regulation of function, and all of this control is literally dependent on the nervous system. This is from one side, so internal organs are regulated by the nervous system. From the other side, our cognitive type of the functions, yes, so all of the what's like a functions what we as the human beings are using for simply during the everyday life, like thinking, analysis, memory, and so on. This everything is also associated with the nervous system, as well as even we do not mention that and realize that, but every time we are performing adequate response on the environmental stimuli, on the environmental changes, yes? So we avoid danger. If we see, for example, the car which is moving towards us, we are trying to simply step away, yes? So what is this? What are all of these particular functions? This everything literally is dependent on the nervous system. So let's talk more about the part of anatomy, and then let's continue with the part of physiology of a nervous system. And the very first thing what we can say that the whole nervous system can be subdivided into two parts. These are CNS, standing for the central nervous system, and PNS, standing for peripheral nervous system. Here in the simple Google, I can show you one interesting thing. Look. It will be the nervous system divisions. These schematical representations are really very interesting for us. Let me show you, because I want you to remember that and understand that very well, because according to that simple and general divisions, we will be discussing about the nervous system, okay? So, for example, this very nice table which designates the divisions here, or even like, okay, let's first look at this one and then we can go through the next picture. Just a second, please. Let me make it, zoom it simply. So as we said, the whole nervous system. So what is the nervous system? It's an organ system. Am I right? So it means that it should be also composed of the organs and some structures. And sure, all of these organs and structures should be composed of the tissue. So please remember that in the case of a nervous system, sure, the type of the tissue which will be present, this is the nervous tissue mainly. So if, for example, in case of the other type of the organs, we had there the combination, for example, of the muscular tissue as well as the part of the epithelial tissue and so on. Here, sure, we will have the presence of, for example, the epithelial tissue, but mainly we will see the representation of the nervous tissue. First, let's talk, as I said, about this particular subdivisions. So starting with the very beginning, we have nervous system, which is subdivided into two parts. This is the central nervous system, so abbreviation is CNS, and this is peripheral nervous system, and abbreviation here is PNS. In case of CNS, we have only two representatives, and these are brain and the spinal cord. So brain is literally housed by the cranium, so the skull, And because the both of the structures are literally are very delicate structures, here we do have particularly the protection. And in case of brain, the protection is dependent on the skull. So, and in the case of the spinal cord, the protection is dependent on the vertebral column. So the vertebral column is literally housing the spinal cord. So what should be general representations and functions of the brain and the spinal cord? That literally the brain is the one which receives all of the information from outside, from the environment, as well as from the internal organs. Here in the brain, the information is processed, so and analyzed, compared to some memory and so on. And as a result, we do have the particular initiation of particular adequate response, you know. So also it helps us to store the memory. It also participates in the cognitive type of the functions, as I already said. So these everything is mainly dependent on the brain. So we could say that one of the most complex structures in case of the whole nervous system, not only the CNS, this is particularly the part of the brain. In case of the spinal cord, which is also representation of the CNS, as I said, in this case, what do we have? We have the also reception and receiving of the stimuli from the sorry environment and internal organs. And mainly what it does, it conducts this stimuli, this information towards the brain. And as a result, also sure conducts the responses which are initiated in the brain and should be propagated towards the lower parts of our body. So in case of the PNS or peripheral nervous system, you can see we do have two. So PNS simply is composed of the nerves. So the structures, these cylindrical, it's like that structures, which we simply call nerves, which are originating from the CNS, so from the level of the brain, as well as the level of the spinal cord, and then passing through all of the parts of the body. That's why we say that it's peripheral nervous system. It's on the periphery compared to the CNS. Well, sorry. The whole information which is propagated from the periphery towards the CNS, we can, or vice versa, from CNS towards the periphery, we can subdivide into two parts. One is sensory and one is motor. Sensory literally means that we have the propagation of impulse from always from the periphery towards the CNS. So literally it means that, for example, when we are simply putting the hand on the, I don't know, hot oven, yes, what we do, sure, we are trying to avoid and start to move the hand away from the oven. But what is happening, yes, it's clear for us, but what is happening at the level of the nervous system, how it is contributing in that particular movement. So here comes that we do have the first, the receiving of impulse, the receiving of the high temperature by the receptors which are present in the skin of the hand. Yes, so receptors start to produce the action potential, and the action potential is then propagated by the nerve fibers where towards the central nervous system. So it means that we have this sensory type of the modalities. We call them modalities, so different, let's look at sensory feelings such as temperature, pain, vibration, touch, for example, and so on. So all of these will be perceived by the receptors in the periphery and will be conducted from the periphery towards the CNS, where we will have, as I already said, conduction of the signals towards the brain, and then we have the processing of this information, and as a result, we'll have the adequate response. And this adequate response will be also propagated by the impulses from the CNS now towards the periphery, now towards effector organ, which is in this case should be the muscle, to contract for producing the movement. As a result, we can say that the whole peripheral nervous system is subdivided into two parts. So nerves can be subdivided into two parts. So the ones which contain the sensory information and the ones which contain the motor information. You see? So again and again, that's why it's written that in the sensory info you have the propagation of the impulse from periphery towards the CNS, and that's what we call afferent type of the impulses, and vice versa, afferent, A-F or A-double-F-E-R-E-N-T. And in the case of the motor neurons, we have vice versa. We have the propagation of impulse from the CNS towards the periphery, towards the effector organ, such as muscle, such as gland, for example. And here, that's what we call particularly the efferent type of the impulse. So E-double-F, efferent. So as a result, two of these representations are very important. For the motor one, we can see here that we subdivide the motor output into two types of the motor outputs. One is somatic nervous system, one is autonomic nervous system. Why? Because I told you already that the nervous system helps us to regulate not only our responses of the environment, yes, I mean on the changes in the environment, but also it regulates the function of the internal organs. As the result, the autonomic nervous system, which is controlling the internal organs, okay, it's the one subdivision of the motor neurons, and the somatic nervous system, it's the second subdivision of the motor peripheral nervous system, which controls literally the movements of the body. And that's why here you would mention two important words, voluntary and involuntary. Where voluntary stands for what? It stands for functions which are performed according to our own desire. So literally, when we talk about the movement, when we talk about the movement, I mean of the body, locomotion, like I want now to speak, I want to explain that to you, and this is under my own control what to say, yes, and what type of the sounds to produce, yes, so articulating with the oral cavity and so on. And vice versa happens in the case of internal organs. They are not dependent on our own desire. So right now you are sitting and listening to me, and I'm here and explaining to you some information. But what is the most interesting thing? That at the same time all of us have the heart which is beating itself, yes, and the regulation, if it will beat faster or it will be slower, is literally dependent on the regulation from the autonomic nervous system, yes. So because it's not dependent on our own desire. Or for example, we had the breakfast today, yes, so the breakfast is passing now through the whole GI tract and is literally digested. It's literally like the nutrients are absorbed and so on. Is this everything dependent on us? Sure not. It's not our own desire. It is simply involuntary type of the control of the internal organs. So as a result, the motor output can be subdivided into the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. Please remember that. In the autonomic nervous system, so the one which is involuntary, the one which is regulating the regulating the internal organs, here we do have the two more subdivisions. And as you can see here, one is the part of a sympathetic division and one is the parasympathetic division. So the sympathetic one is the one which we also call fight or flight response, which means that during that particular innervation, the internal organs are mainly, like different internal organs are having different types of the effects. Like in case of the cardiovascular system, we do have, for example, fast beat, so increased heart rate. We do have increased blood pressure, for example, and so on. Vice versa, and in case of the GI tract, most of the functions literally here are how to say, they are inhibited. Why? Because fight or flight response is most commonly activated when we do have, when our body or is literally is literally in the state of stress or emergency situation. Like again, we see the car which is fastly moving towards us. This is the stressful and emergency type of situation. What we need to do, what should happen in our body? Sure, we ourselves decide that, oh, we need to move, but the muscles to contract faster and more vigorously need to have a larger amount of the blood supply. Yes, so as a result, our sympathetic nervous system helps us to perform the function what is needed to be performed. How? Distributing, or correctly to say, redistributing the blood towards the brain to make the decision, correct decision, as well as towards the, for example, the muscles. And as a result, we can fastly perform the movement. So as a result, vice versa happens in the case of the parasympathetic innervation. Parasympathetic innervation is also known as a rest or digest type of the response, meaning that in this case we have opposite situation. We have lack of the stress. Most commonly the parasympathetic is very much activated after the meal, when the GI tract needs to work. And in this case, we do have a redistribution of the blood supply towards the parts of the digestive system. You see, so these particular subdivisions are really very much important to understand the functions as well as the structure of the nervous system. Till now, was it clear, or I should say it again? Anything what you wanted, up to you. So if you need, I will explain it again. But I do believe till now it was very clear, yeah? Good. So if it's clear, then let's continue. To be honest, what you see in this case as the distribution, it's not that accurate type of distribution. Although all of these parts are true, are the part of a nervous system, like brain and spinal cord representing the CNS. But here it's written out peripheral nerves, autonomic nerves, enteric nerves, they form peripheral nervous system. So in reality, peripheral, like nerves themselves are already peripheral structures, okay? So, and these nerves will be containing the fibers for autonomic, for somatic type of the innervation. Enteric nerves or enteric innervation is literally associated with the digestive tract. Do you remember when we were talking about the layers of a digestive tract? We said we have four main type of the layers. Yes, innermost was the part of mucosa with the epithelial lining. Then we had the submucosa of the connective tissue representation. Then we had the muscularis structures, the circular and the longitudinal muscles, as well as we have the part of the serosa on the outermost region of the digestive tract. And we said that in case of the submucosa, as well as between the muscular layers, we have the innervation. So we have the nerve fibers which are passing through. So that's true. That's what we call enteric nervous system. So it is literally associated with the digestive tract, but its regulation, although it may be regulating also itself the some functions of a digestive tract, but its regulation is still dependent on the autonomic innervation. Again, we do have the autonomic nervous system here, which is presented, okay? Also, when we said about when I start to talk about the peripheral nervous system, I said one important word that I'm sorry, that we have there the sensory division. Yeah, so sensory nerve fibers. But I said one thing. I said that during any particular changes in the environment, the receptors, which may be present in the skin, in the subcutaneous tissue, in the internal organs, and so on, they are the ones which are first percepting this impulse, yes, and then percepting this impulse, they are propagating the information where towards the peripheral nervous system, and then it goes towards the CNS. Am I right? So what is happening in this case, like how it works, that's the most interesting thing. So what are these receptors? Please remember that we can subdivide the whole sensory nervous system into several types. One is the general senses or general sensory modalities, which I told you already. Pain, temperature, touch, pressure, also proprioception. Proprioception is an ability and the sensory information about the position of the body or parts of the body or state of the muscles, for example. I mean, their tone, how much tense they are, and so on. So what I wanted to say here, yes, we have a general senses, so which are literally the receptors for which we have scattered through the whole body, through the whole surface of the body, as well as in the internal organs, by the way, because pain, we elicit and we feel the pain even in the internal organs, for example, in the abdomen, yes, and so on, abdominal region, I mean. But from the other side, we do have the special senses, and that's why you see here that we have a special sensory organs which contain the receptors, such as vision is the special sense, yes. The auditory information, so sound literally, it also will be the special sense. That's why we have eyes, ears, we have tongue for the taste, we have nose for the smell. So again, vision, auditory info, taste, smell, all of them are representatives of the sensory part, but the subdivision of the special senses, the ones which are not associated with the general, like pain and temperature and so on, yes. So although what I want you to understand, although we will talk about every and each of the sense a little bit separately, still I want you to understand that right now, sitting and listening to me, guys, and I don't know, watching this book or whatever doing, your all of the senses are working. So your CNS, so brain, receives the information about everything. Like right now, if you are sitting in front of the computer, or maybe right now you're laying on the bed, why not? Yes, we have the online meeting. So what I want to tell you is that, yeah, like during the lecture you will be changing, for example, the poses. You know why? Because the and not only right now, like all, it's always like that, even when we are sitting, yes, in one particular position, sure, we are changing the positions. Why? Because we do have the passage of the blood supply towards the different regions, yes, particularly when we are sitting on the part of the buttocks, yes. So what is happening in this case? We do have the compression of the blood vessels, and as a result we have a lack of the blood supply here. But because our nervous system is working normally, that's why what we do, we are changing the positions. We do not do that consciously, even, maybe, yes. So because or even sometimes when we're sitting like on one lower extremity, yes, for example, on the chair and so on, what is happening? You feel like sometimes numbness, yes. So when you start to change the position, so this everything at the same time, so you feel you hear my voice now, my explanation, you watch the presentation or whatever it is, So you see what you do? Literally, your whole sensory info is continuously propagating the impulses towards the CNS. Okay, and the CNS is analyzing it and gives you the feedback, and this feedback, motor feedback, is that you know that you need to listen to me, or maybe you just don't want to listen to me and you just switched on the meeting and you just went to do some coffee and so on. That's also may happen. Yes, I don't know in really. So but this is the decision of what, of your CNS. Yes, so you decided like that to do. So this is your response, you see? So this everything is literally dependent on the part of the nervous system. So let's continue now and let's see what else do we have here and what are important information. First of all, when we started to talk about the peripheral nervous system and said that we have the nerve fibers, so the nerves, yes, so which are like, the question is what they are composed of. So what are the main structures in this case? Like what should be there? This is the most important part. So, like, what do I mean in this case? Like, if we said about all of the other organ systems that they are composed of particular tissues and cells. So, what about the nervous one? Yes, what is the composition of the nervous tissue in this case? Um, so, before going to the part of the nerves, here I do have, if I remember correctly, I do have the part of the nervous, like this general explanation of the tissue, which I want to share with you. Yeah, here it is. Just a second, please. Yeah, here it is. I will upload that presentation on your drive that you have. So, first, what is happening here is that what is the embryological development of that particular tissue? Because without understanding the tissue, we cannot talk about the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves themselves, so peripheral nervous system. So embryonic development is really very interesting. In case of the embryo, we know that we do have at the beginning the formation of the three layers or three layers of the cells, which are different, and they are the layers which we call ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Yes. So the ectoderm, which we could say outermost layer in this case, it is simply giving rise to the formation of the nervous system, as well as it gives rise to the formation of the integumentary system. Integumentary system means skin and its appendages. So here we do have a really very nice picture which designates only the part of the ectoderm. There is no endoderm and it's not just not seen here. So for simplicity, you see. So what is happening? First, we have the like it's the layer, it's the smooth layer of the cells. Then in the embryo, it starts to produce like an invagination. Do you see? And as a result of this invagination, we do have the formation of the tube-like structure. And this tube-like structure, we call it the neural tube. Please remember that most of the parts, the structures of the nervous system are literally produced from this neural tube. So CNS and the biggest portion of the PNS is literally produced from this neural tube. From the other side, you see that in the greenish color, but like immediately to that neural tube, we do have also the formation of some cells which we call neural crest cells. So the some structures of the nervous system and plus some other more are literally produced from the neural crest cells. So what can you see, for example, here in this picture? I don't know if it will be zoomed well. Yes, it is. It is. So what do you see? That we do have here it is ectodermal part. Now it will be Okay, let me explain till the end this part. So what is left in the bluish color, what is left would then will be connected to each other. This will be the one producing the part of the skin, particularly a portion of the epidermis. So in case of neural crest cells, we have a different types of the structures which can be produced. And one of them, one of the most interesting, is that in this case we'll have the formation of the melanocytes, which are the pigmented type of the cells represented in the epidermis. So the ones which are producing the melanin, and the melanin is the protective pigment from the UV light. I mean the UV radiation in the sunlight. As well as here we do have the formation of the cells for which are represented in the adrenal glands, and you will see why, because it is also very closely associated with the nervous system. So, as the result, when we talk about the embryogenesis or histogenesis, so simply of the nervous tissue, so where it comes from, you see that the most of the nervous tissue has the ectodermal origin. You see the formations of first the neural plate, which is simply the smooth type of the ectoderm. Then we do have formation of the groove, as I told you, and then we have the formation of the tube. And here you see the most important type of the cells, which we call simply the main functional unit of the nervous system or nervous tissue. This is the neurons. So the neurons are the ones which are eliciting the impulse and propagating the impulse. Okay, so they are the ones which are producing the action potential, so the literally this impulse, so action potential, and propagating it through all of the parts of the nervous system. Although, because the neurons are so important and they have so what's like that essential type of the functions, it means that we need to have a very good protection and support to the neurons. That's why we do have the other type of the cells which are represented in the nervous tissue, and these are the glial cells. Okay, the glial cells are helping in several ways. They are protecting the neurons. They are giving the nutritive supply to the neurons, and so on. As well as we do have some epithelial type of the cells here, which are helping to produce the CSF or cerebrospinal fluid, which is like compared to cardiovascular system. Do you remember in the case of circulatory system, I've talked about the lymphatics, yes? And I told you that the lymphatics are the ones helping to drain the excessive fluid from the tissues, as well as it helps us to play the immune role, and so on. In case, please remember that in case of the nervous system, we do not have the lymphatics. It is devoid of the lymphatics, but on the other side, it has the alternative, let's like that, fluid, which is also produced as the result of the filtration of the blood plasma, as it was in the case of the lymph. So, and this is the CSF. So as a result, cerebrospinal fluid, from the name cerebrospinal, I do believe it's clear, yes, that it is the one which is surrounding the portion of the cerebrum, so which is the brain, as well as the part of the spinal cord. So as a result, here, sure, we'll have the presentation of the epithelial cells. Is it clear till now what I'm saying? I do believe it's clear. Okay. What are the questions? Is this PPT coming to? Yes, sure. I wanted to explain it in the previous lecture, but none of you were here. So yes, it will be in your midterm. That's for sure. Well, to continue with the part of the neural crest cells, what type of cells we can have? I already told you one of the interesting things that we have the melanocytes of the skin, so the ones which are producing the melanin, as I already told you. Interesting thing, the part of the odontoblasts, even in the region of the teeth, are also produced from the part of the neural crest cells, as well as we do have the part of the adrenal medulla, as I told you, adrenal gland cells, which are also produced from the neural crest cells, as well as the part of the layers, we call them meningeal layers, which are surrounding the central nervous system, which are also giving the protection, such as these layers are pia and the arachnoid matrix. Both of them are produced from this region, as you can see. So, and so on. So even the part of the some cells of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic region are, I mean, division, are also produced from the neural crest cells. That's what I want you to remember. Now let's continue. So let's talk about the cells themselves, and here we do have a part of the neurons. First of all, let's talk about what are the main compositional parts of the neurons. One, we do have the three parts: a cell body, the axon, the dendrites. So all of these are the three main structures which are literally representing the. Just a second. Um, So what are the structures? Let's go through it. Better to see in the first in this schematic representation, and then we'll go to the micrographs. So what do we see in this case? First, we have the part of the soma or cell body or pericardium. So this is the part of the cell of the neuron where we have the formation of most of the structures. We do have the projections from the cell body, and here we do have the dendrites, this smaller type of the projections, as well as we do have the axon, which is a longest type of the projection. Most commonly, in case of the cell, we literally have only one axon and different numbers of the dendrites. So what are these different numbers? So it can be many dendrites, and according to that we have even the types of the neurons. So here you can see, for example, the multipolar. This is the multipolar, the good representation of multipolar neurons. Multipolar means that from the cell body we have many poles which are originating and producing many dendrites, as well as the axon. We do have the type of the bipolar, as you can see, cells, and bipolar cells are literally producing only two projections from the cell body. We do have unipolar or pseudo-unipolar type of a neuron, meaning that from the cell body we have only one projection, but then it starts to subdivide and produce the one axon. This everything is one axon, you see? So as a result, we have literally the different types of the neurons. So this means that in the central nervous system, in the part of the peripheral nervous system, we can find the different types of the neurons. Okay. So please remember, most commonly when we talk about the PNS or peripheral nervous system, yes, saying about the nerves. So please remember that these nerves will be simply a bundles or collection of many neurons, particularly their axons, because the axons can be so long, like up to 100 centimeters. So why, like you will ask, why 100 centimeters and how it can happen? So imagine that we do have the not imagine, we do have the muscles which are represented where? In the part of our feet, yes? So we are producing particular movement there, so they need to be contracted or relaxed. It means that we need to have the innervation, and we know that in case of the peripheral nervous system, we said that it always originates from where? From the CNS. So at the level of the spinal cord, which is literally terminating, so it passes through the whole vertebral column, but terminates somewhere at the lumbar region. Yes, so at the region of the lower back. So from here, these axons, which are originating, they are passing directly towards the muscles of the foot. So can you imagine how long should be the distance that they are covering? So as a result, my dears, we do have literally the nerves, which are simply composed of the large amount of the neurons. I do believe it's understandable. Well, um, uh, also interesting part, according to the functional classification of the neurons that we do have a part of the motor neurons, we have a sensory neurons, and we do have the interneurons. So what does it mean? So the neurons, which are, so one neuron, one cell, can propagate the information either from the CNS towards the periphery, towards the effector organ. So it will be always motor, okay? Or one neuron can propagate the information from the periphery towards the CNS, and it will be always what? Sensory type of the neuron, yes? But inside of the CNS, we have a whole pool of the neurons. There are many, many smaller type of the neurons, which are connecting sensory with the motor, which are connecting many of the sensory neurons with only one motor. So there are many, many, many connections. And that's what we call the interneurons. Interneurons are really very short type of neurons connecting all of the structures to each other. Okay? But still the connection will be always from one side to the other. So it means that even the interneuron either will be propagating the information from the sensory portion towards the motor, okay, or it will be propagating it towards the, I don't know, other parts of the CNS. So that's what I want you also to understand before we'll go to talk about the peripheral nerves and what type of nerves do we have there. So in the part of the neuron, when we talk about the cell body of a neuron, as I told you, it literally contains most of the part of the cytoplasm. So it contains the nucleus, as you can see here, as well as the cytoplasm. So it means that it contains most of the organelles, so such as mitochondria, such as Golgi complex, such as, I don't know, endoplasmic reticulum, and so on. You see that they have a very well developed rough endoplasmic reticulum. Why? Because here we do have the formation of the proteins, yes? So as well as we do have the Golgi complex, as I told you, mitochondria, and so on. Very interesting thing that we do have that because the neuron, please remember that nervous tissue is non-regenerable. What does it mean? There is no regeneration. So it means that if there is the cell death, yes, there will not be regeneration of the neuron. So as a result, what is happening? The cell which is produced, it will develop, it will be there for the whole life before being damaged and so on. As a result, through the whole life, imagine we have some accumulation of the undigested material, and that's what we call the lipofuscin or lipofuscin. So this is particularly what do we have as the it shows like the So what is also interesting for us is that in case of the cell body, which is okay, one and large, it also we said that produces the projections like the dendrites. Yes, so all of these dendrites are literally important for one thing. The dendrites as well as the cell body. To be honest, they are producing the connections between the other neurons. So that's what we call the synapses. So synapse is the communication way between the neurons. So that's why the dendrites are literally important for one thing. So well, I'm sorry, looks like something has happened with the internet. Can you hear me, please, first of all? Good. So, on which particular part you couldn't already hear me? Where should I continue from? Like what I was talking about when you couldn't already hear me. Okay, let me continue. So, as a result, I told you to transmit the information from one neuron to the other, we do have, or the neurons are establishing the connection or communication, which we simply call the synapses, you see? So, these synapses are mainly established between the dendrites and the cell body of one neuron and the axons of the other neuron. So every dendrite has its projection. Do you see? This is the dendrite. Here is the projection and like bulb-like structure. That's what we call the dendritic spine. You know. So and this dendritic spine is the one which is producing the synapse. More dendritic spines do we have per each dendrite, more synapses are established, more information is propagated in this case, you know. In case of the axon, what do we have? We have even the whole terminology associated with the axon. This is also very interesting to see and why. I want to show you how it looks like. I mean, the axon itself. Okay, for example, here, I don't know. So what I want to show you is that the axon is always a one very long type of the projection. So the axon has the axon helix. This is the very initial part of the axon, which is associated with the cell body. As it is passes through, you see that we do have here at the end of the axon, we do have the branching. We call it arborization, so simply branching of the axon. And this arborization, as you can see on the lower part, on the terminal part, they have also these bulb-like structures, which we call axon terminal button, which are performing literally the synapse. More arborization, more buttons we have, more amount of the synapses we will have. Okay, this is important to remember. Now, in the part of the plasma membrane of the of the axon is also known as axolemma, and the cytoplasm of the axon is also known as axoplasm. So you can see here that although it doesn't mean that it's something different, no, it just devoided of most of the organelles, but it will contain a large amount of the mitochondria, as well as it will contain large amount of the vesicles containing what? Containing the part of the substances which we call neurotransmitters, important for the normal synapsing of two neurons. Okay, that's what you can see here. You see the vesicles. This is the axon terminal. This is the vesicle here. You see inside of which we do have the neurotransmitters. So we do have this chemicals. Okay, let's